Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman. I am the streamer for this stream, and as you might guess from the name, we build software as a service, that's SaaS, and we use Python and we use Django to do it. And my goal in the stream is to teach people and work on a side project, and that's the short of it. If you're enjoying what you watch as you follow along and want to follow me on Twitch or subscribe on YouTube when it gets posted later, please do so. It helps out, and you'll find out when I'm streaming in the future. So we're going to jump straight into things tonight. We're continuing from where we left off last week, which is to make deployment simpler for my software as a service. So the service that I run is called College Conductor, and just here's the page. We don't need to know anything about it today. It's really not important. We're going to be deep in the guts of deployment. But this is when I talk about Conductor or this and make references to the code, this is the app that I'm talking about. It's a real site. It's out there on the internet. You can go visit it if you want and check out the code, which is on GitHub. So here's the issue that we're getting into, and we're looking at making deployment simpler is the basic idea, and we're doing that by removing steps from the deployment tool, Ansible, and moving a lot of those steps into the continuous integration system, so that when deployments happen, there are fewer tools that need to be installed on the server and fewer steps, so fewer opportunities for failure. In order to do that, we're bundling all of the Python code and packages up into a single zip app archive, which is a zip file that is executable and has the web server baked right into it, so you can run it directly as a single file. So we've been going through the process of making that work and hitting some fun, interesting problems along the way as we get it closer to being ready to deploy it. And last week we worked on fixing up templates so that when you try and actually reach the site, it will resolve to the right template and render the right thing. And we fixed that, but then we immediately hit another bug. And that bug was related to static files. So static files are your images, your CSS files, your JavaScript, all that stuff. And the message was a little cryptic if you don't know much about Django. Thankfully, I understand what this message is trying to tell me, I think, and so we will work from that. So this is how my plan for the evening is to work out this bug, and I think it's going to be one of these things where it's going to take a while to get there, because there's going to be a bunch of backtracking that we have to do to fix everything up. So if you have any questions, shoot them over in the chat. Please just keep it civil if you can. I will ban you if you can't. And we're going to have some fun and get into some code. So let's talk about the error message in particular to give us a good grounding for what's happening. When the template is rendered on the first page that we're looking at, the home page, it wants to load different images of different types and JavaScript and style sheets, cascading style sheets. And the way that is done is Django, the template, sees a static file path, and it uses the static files system to look up the right asset to provide to give back a path. But the problem here, and what's really happening, is this pathing. So when I'm doing a development version of this thing, what exists in the repository is this images twitter.png file. And let's see if we can dig up that file. Yeah, so this is a binary file, so that's not going to look good. But here's a directory of images that lives in this assets directory. And these are things that get displayed at a certain point on the site. And so they need to be there. But the reason this error is popping up is because of a certain setting that I use. So if we jump over to the settings and take a look at, what would this be? Here it is. The static files storage mechanism that we're going to use. And the particular mechanism is part of Django. It's available. It's called the manifest static file storage. And the manifest part is the important word to key in on there. So what happens is when you use this storage format, it takes all of your static assets, and I can't remember if it's MD5 or SHA-1 or SHA-256, but it runs a hashing function on the content of those files to generate a unique fingerprint. And that fingerprint is just a bunch of numbers and hexadecimal values. It's a long string. But the point of that is that Django runs it through the system to essentially rename all of your files to include this fingerprint in the file. So in the example of the error message, it wouldn't be, the final result wouldn't be images twitter.png. It might be something more like images twitter.abcdef12345.png. It's going to look more like one of these UUIDs that you see right above here, just kind of a bunch of letters and numbers. And there's a good reason for that. The reason is a lot of these static files don't change very often. Like this Twitter file, for example, I'm not, ever since I uploaded it, I'm not sure that it has changed at all. So what you want to do in your web deployment is set your web server so that it has very long caching of files. So if you have a visitor to your site and you have this long caching, the next time they come back to your site, their local browser will have that data cached, and it will just immediately load that rather than coming back to your server to make the request again. This has very good speed advantages for someone who's returning, but it has some complications that come with it. And the big complication and the whole reason for fingerprinting is this. If we did not fingerprint these things, and it was just, let's say, images twitter.png, and we had that file and put the long caching headers on it, and somebody comes to the site and gets that version of the file, if I were to make changes to that file and then redeploy, because of the long caching headers, and when I'm saying long, like these things are targeted to out years, and that's effectively like for the person's entire life of their browser, they will never have to fetch this file again, is the idea. And if you do that, the browser on their end is going to say, I don't need to fetch this file, so it's going to load up the old file. So you might have changed it in an important way, but because of caching and the fact that the cache is not invalidated, it will display the old one. So by fingerprinting them and making that fingerprint be off of the content of the file, every time you change the file's content, it will generate a new file name with a new fingerprint, some other set of random characters. And this will effectively break the cache for that file so that the user's browser will download the new one. So that's the core concept around fingerprinting and caching and this sort of thing. And the manifest static file storage, is just to close the loop, does all of this for you. So you get your static assets. None of them have been fingerprinted in any way, and Django does some processing to calculate these things and rename them. And to do that, to make this process finish properly, it has to create a manifest, and the manifest is a mapping that has you can think of it as like a gigantic dictionary, and the keys in the manifest would be the original file name, in this case images twitter.png, and the value on the other side of the key is the fingerprinted file name. So it's doing a lookup of the image file in order to get that. And that kind of gets us back to this error message. So what this error is complaining about is it can't find the manifest entry. And I suspect that what's really happening is it can't find the manifest at all, because the static file's path might be out of date, or not aligned with how this new method of doing deployment works. We've had to modify some settings parameters to make the Django app, which was designed to work with a GitHub repository and tweak it in order to work with this one file execution environment. So the job that I think is in front of us is twofold. The first is to make sure that the setting is correct where we expect it to be. And I suspect even if we get that correct, we haven't put out new static files. Well, is that true? That might not be true because we're still relying on the git clone. So we did a deployment, and the deployment is putting up the static file. So we might be getting the benefit of it working just because it's depending on the old deployment process. But I don't think it's going to work long term. So if we look at GitHub and we look at the milestone that I've created for all the set of work, one piece that I anticipated doing was having to take the static assets and generate them in CI and make a tarball, and then during deployment pull that tarball down and extract it. Tarball is a colloquial name for a tar.gz file, which is an archive type of file that's very common in Linux. And the reason we'd have to do that is the whole goal of this thing is to remove all the build tooling from the server. So with no build tooling on it, we can't otherwise generate the static assets. So there will be no node, no npm, no collect static command to run. We're trying to get all that stuff off, which is why it needs to move to continuous integration, because it has to be done somewhere in order to have the proper static files. So here's what I want to do. I think let's go over to the code, and the first thing to check on is the settings. So I have another terminal up here. We're going to go to this area where all this stuff is, and we're going to source the environment variables that are needed for this environment, which lets us start things up properly. And we're going to go into the apps where we've been putting these things. And if we do a list here, you can see here's the app package itself, this PYZ thing. And here's the settings files, which I've copied in because we're just kind of faking it for now by hacking in directories in certain places where they'll work, with the intent of properly filling in the deployment later. So to check on the settings, we're going to launch a Django shell. And last week, one of the actions that we took was to modify this executable to have two different paths. So it's looking for this word manage, and if it sees that as the first argument in the argv list, which is what manage and shell is, then it launches the Django shell, or it launches the Django manage command. And if manage is not the first word in the sysargv list, it will drop into gunicorn, which is what we see over here somewhere. Oh, it's just doing a bunch of these things. Yeah. Okay. Where are you? Why are you repeating this so much? That's weird. I don't think I noticed it doing that before. Maybe it's trying to do it over and over again. I'm not really sure what happened there. But you can see up here when we invoked it the first time, the first thing in the argv list is a -b flag rather than the word manage. So it fired up into the gunicorn mode. So that's just how this package has now two capabilities built into it. I'm really curious why it keeps doing that. Put in some spaces and see if it's like a timing thing. It's periodically trying to do that. I can't imagine it would be, but who knows. So we want to look at the settings, and the way to do that is to import it from Django conf, and that will give us access to all of the settings. And the particular settings that we're interested right now is this one, static files. Is it? Well, let's find out. So we say settings, static files, Dirs. Okay, so it's looking, I think that's the problem right here. It knows its current root directory where it's executing, and it's just joining that, and that's just wrong. Those files are not there. If we get out of the shell, so serve apps assets is where it thinks those things should be. But really, the stuff is under here in serve conductor. This is the clone. This too will eventually go away. So we need to point the static files to the proper thing. What's confusing to me though is it seems like okay. Maybe what's happening is well, I'm thinking through this, sorry. We think it's missing that manifest file. That's idea number one. And so where would that file be and what would it be called is the question, or is one question that I have. The other thing to check, let's go back to that area, start up the shell again. So I probably should just have opened another terminal and do it this way, but that's okay. Is to check on some of those other settings, like what are they? Static URL, I think those things have been changed for this particular server. This is the base settings that I'm showing here, and the base settings get overridden for different environments. So the static root might be different. The static root is at var conductor, and the static URL is not important. That's how, like, so static URL is when your browser is like doing a lookup, it like stick with the images twitter.png file. So the path to that would be collegeconductor.com/static/images/twitter.png with whatever the fingerprint is. What's more important here though is this path of static root. So let's actually bring up a different terminal and just have a few different places so we don't have to be restarting and stopping things over and over again. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I'll be happy to pause and try and answer the best I can. So we're going to, what was it? var conductor. And that's root owned, I think, so that's why it's not completing for me. So this is just a local virtual machine, so I'm just going to be in there as root. I would not necessarily recommend running around as root on your real production servers, but for an environment that is throwaway, I think that's okay. Okay, here's the file that's interesting. And you can see I've done multiple deployments. So actually this is a perfect example. Some of these things have definitely changed as I've rolled out features and changes to the code. And as I've modified JavaScript, part of my JavaScript toolchain is to build out a new app.js file. And you can see that there's a fingerprint here, the 397 F1 stuff. And each of these is a different version. So if we open up the static files JSON, wow, that looks gnarly. Well, it's a single line because they're compressing it down to be the smallest possible thing to make it as fast as possible to load. But you can, just from this first line, like we can check this out. So there's this sort ascending disabled PNG file. I don't really remember what this is for. Oh, it's for some table that is sortable in the code. And that's the key for it. So when the template references this thing, static files will look in this data structure and find this particular key, and then come up with this value, the other side, that ends in D7DC10 here, and that's what it will send out to the server. Hopefully that makes sense of this is how the lookups are happening on template rendering. And so if we look for, there it is, twitter.png. Oops, let's get back to there. So there's the thing that it was complaining about, twitter.png, and it's saying that the file path is images twitter.png b057 blah blah blah. Okay, so that's cool. So if we look in that images directory, and well, interesting, there it is. Oh, but we said that it was pointed, the settings here were pointed at the wrong directory. Is that right? Maybe not. So that's a good question. I'm now curious of why did this fail? It seems like missing static files manifest entry. It's almost like it didn't load the static files path correctly, but that's sort of silly because we just saw that there is a path there at this var www conductor, and we just also saw that the static root still is that path. So, and on top of that, we saw that the images Twitter PNG did have an entry in that static files thing that was B057 blah blah blah, and to top all that off, when we listed out the images, there's B057 blah blah blah. So now I'm getting confused. Now it seems like that should have worked and it didn't. So what didn't resolve is maybe that's a trickier question. I thought I had a good idea of a clear idea of what the problem was going to be, and I'm not so sure that's true anymore. This seems plausible, and yet here we are, and it doesn't work. So I guess we're getting down to how are we going to debug this? And I honestly am not sure in some level, because what I don't know, I don't have good tooling in mind for getting into this zip app. Maybe that's something that is available for Shiv apps that I don't know about. We could consider, we could unzip it and run from the extracted stuff, but that starts to be something different at that point. So the other alternative is we build a whole new one with a debug point at the place where we think it's failing, but that's kind of like gross. That's a lot of work for just to put a breakpoint in there. So I'm trying to think of what we can do to put this through the debugger, and if that would be even helpful. Because what I essentially want to have happen is get down to some of this area and figure out how it failed. Okay, so before we go crazy with debuggers and all of that, let's just look at this code. I sometimes even forget myself. I've been doing this a long time, but it is helpful to read the error message always, and then sometimes jump into like where the value error is being raised and see the context of it. So we want to go to line 422. That's something else. 422. And so this is interesting. This stored name, I'm guessing name is probably the image is Twitter PNG, I would assume. But looking through the traceback to trying to confirm that. So where are we? We're in render, handle simple, URL. That does not look like the path for this guy. I mean, that's definitely where the value error is, but that traceback doesn't seem right unless they're passing stored name around as something different, which is entirely possible. So yeah, there's the hashed name func. It's probably been like stored in that stored name has probably been stuck in a variable called hash name func. So let's look at another file. And oh, I think that was the same file, just a different line. Yep. All right, stay in that file, 134. Okay, so we're not in debug. So we came down here. The name, yeah, and there you can see it's passing in the actual function that's doing the lookup, and it's getting the hashed name out of that table, or that's what it's supposed to be doing, and then generating a final URL from there. But was it 442? 422. 422. Okay. So for whatever reason, it didn't find it. And so I think maybe the thing to do is figure out like what's in here. Why is it not finding it? Because that's even kind of weirder. So it's almost like it's not even finding the key. So I think my intuition about this is that while I think it should be reading the static files.json file, it's not actually doing that. And I don't know why. I don't know what path it's actually reading from. Because the static files manifest, I thought it would use from the var www conductor area, because that's the only place I've even seen that kind of file format. It wasn't in the assets directory. We looked in there. Yeah, let's go over there for a second. So under the repository, this is where this was the static files dir, and here's just the built stuff that comes from JavaScript. And you can see there's no static files.json in here. So for some reason, the Shiv app does not seem to be reading the static files. Maybe we can poke at this a little bit more. The shell should have all of the same stuff as the runtime environment. because we're passing it the same settings. Is that true? It's not starting gunicorn, so maybe it hasn't actually gone through any of the middleware and loaded some stuff up. So it may not be true, but I'm wondering if we can get into something about the shell and see if we can find some extra settings that are here, and maybe inspect the hashed files. Sorry, I'm trying to like put together in my head where in the world this could be. Like if there's a place that we can actually import the settings, and from here where we already have a shell, can we get the instance that has these hashed files and basically look at like storage.hashed files. I don't know if that's possible or not. So maybe it's time to go to the documentation and see what we have available. Because static file storage is, yeah, here might be, we might be able to get this. Maybe it's an import. Let's see if we can import it. So I'm looking for, what is this import right here? How did they get this static file storage? Or is that some instance variable in that file that we can't access? That's sort of the question on my mind at the moment. And that was at line 118. Oops, that's 18. 118. Go. Oh, cool. So we can access this thing through that path. That's really good. So let's do that. So we've now got the static files storage, and I believe it's going to have that handle our hashed files attribute. Yeah, there it is. Let's try this. Let's see what it's actually loading. Hashed files. Okay, it's an order dict, but is it an order dict with nothing in it? It is. Look at that. So the question is that because we're in the shell, or is the same true also of the conductor of the gunicorn app? So we can verify that. We can go get out of here, and remember, this is the repository, so we can get to the equivalent shell in here from the repository. This is the old way of me accessing stuff. So let's say manage shell. Oops, I gotta activate the, see, this is the, you don't have to activate virtual environments if you have that one thing. So, okay, now we've got a virtual environment. It's got all the environment variables, and we can do manage shell. And it doesn't have the, why did you complain about the debug toolbar? And grep Django. Okay, it didn't actually source this. Okay, there we go. So now manage shell should work. Okay, we're on the same place. Let's do the same static files import. And let's check the length over here. Yeah, okay. So something's wrong with the loading. And let's just out of curiosity, let's see what that static files, hash files, I don't even know what's in there. Okay, it's essentially it's exactly what we talked about. It's a gigantic dictionary keyed by a name and has the stuff at the other side. So, got to figure out why is the conductor shiv app not finding the static files JSON file and loading it? That's weird. I'm going to think up on this for a minute before continuing. Maybe it's time to go to documentation and find out. I don't really know how storages loads that stuff to begin with, or we might even have to read the code to dig it up. This is not the project I want to look at right now. It's a good project, Django Storages, but not the thing I'm going for at the moment. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is. Because... Oh, I made a change not too long ago. And let's see. Storages. But it's only on production. All right, well, it was worth it checking. So on production, some of the asset files are actually being... Oh, that's a different class of assets. I'm sorry. That's for like user uploaded assets. So that's not even what I wanted anyway, I don't think. Now I'm getting confused about myself, so I'll read documentation for a minute until I'm grounded again. I'm getting a little wrapped around the axle about some of these bits. I think that Django Storages is about like when you have model instances that aren't like CSS files or images that are part of your design. This is a different class of images. These are things that are part of your file field and live in a different area. So I'm going down a rabbit hole. That's not what we're interested in. What we really want is Django storage, and we want to look at, let's try and search for the manifest thing. And read a bit about it here. Okay, it answers the question here. It's MD5s. And it tells you why you'd want to do this, which I explained at the beginning about using a far future expires header. Okay, and this right here is the exact value error that we're seeing. It isn't found in static files.json, but frankly, it seems like the thing's not even reading static files.json. It's finding nothing. So what I don't understand, and maybe the bit we could walk through, is how does storages like load this thing to begin with? Because we have clear evidence that the static directory contains the content we care about. So there's a problem in the loading between the old method, the one that works and is on the site, and the new method that we're trying to make work. And I don't know what that difference would be, because the actual settings themselves are all the same. So it's something about how it's looking for this. And we're not running collect static, which is what the static files dirs is really for. So this doesn't seem like this would come into play. This would be like, if you want to run collect static, it needs to know where to look for its base static files to generate the output. That's what that guy is for right there, I think. So, I mean, let's check out that assumption too. So static, there it is, there's the setting. Yeah, it's for the collect static operation. Because during normal operation, we aren't using it, the serving view that serves it directly. Because what ultimately happens is we're just giving a URL for the template to render. And so here's how this flows. The template, the initial base template that we fixed last week, is going to go through everything and generate an HTML response. And in that HTML response, there will be CSS files that have paths and image files and all this other stuff. And what a browser is going to do is it's going to then parse the HTML and see the path, like college conductor / static / images / Twitter, and it's going to make another request back to the server. And the server is not, when you reach collegeconductor.com, you're not directly talking to the Python app. You're actually talking to Django, to Nginx, which is acting as a load balancer between the outside world, and that's what's listening on port 443 and serving the traffic. And when it wants to look up anything that's in the static path, Nginx is configured to take any of those static directories and map it over to var conductor. And so that's why the fingerprinting is important, because the file that's sitting in that just directory that Nginx is serving needs to match up with what was rendered in the template. And so that's what collect static does, is it reads all the files in your assets, does the fingerprinting, puts them in an output directory, then you can use them however you want after that. So it's almost like the conductor Shiv app, when it's starting, is not actually finding static files.json in its startup process. And so the storage engine can't even put these URLs together. It has no bearing on what content is actually in that directory. It's not looking for those files to exist. It's just looking for this manifest file, which makes sense. That's really all it needs, ultimately. So now what? How do we verify how that manifest file gets loaded. We can come out of here, and we have them. We might need to get into the Django source code to look at this. This has been an interesting process, in my opinion, to getting deep into Django, because we are doing something that a lot of people don't do. I don't think very many people actually take the time to bundle an entire Django app and all its dependencies up into a single file. They'll either clone it or SFTP it. There's a number of methods to do this, and this is not a terribly common one. So, how to go about this? Let's bring up. Sorry, I'm getting a little hoarse. Bring up the Django source. We'll go to contrib, where static files lives. And we'll read storage from here. This is the standard storage, which is not what we're interested in. Say hashed files mix in. So here's the manifest name. So we haven't changed that. It should still be able to find that. There's a load manifest. So this is where I'm getting suspect. It's either we didn't get a value error here, so it was able to load a manifest. That's surprising to me. I'm almost, yeah, let's keep reading first. There's a read manifest as well. It's a few lines above. And how is it doing? Oh, this is interesting. How did it do this? There's manifest name, right? So, wow, how does that work? What I'm getting confused about here, if you look at this, there's manifest name is static files.json. There's no full path to it here. That's kind of weird. It almost implies that, like, wherever this storage starts up from, it expects to be able to read that directory. Yeah, really odd. So I might be willing to kind of like hack into this with the existing repo to see what it's doing and to see the current directory. So let's look at how we can do that. We're gonna monkey around with the virtual environment here. Again, this is a terrible idea for like a production machine, but I think we're gonna be okay since we're on a virtual machine, which is not the actual server. So I'm gonna get another shell in here, and we're gonna go into the virtual environment and into Django, which should be at lib site, come on, site packages, Django, contrib static files. And what I want to do is open up this storage thing, go to the manifest files mixin, and basically put a breakpoint right here. Ah, it's marked as read only. I'm gonna have to hold on a second. Yeah, that's not gonna work. So sudo vim storage. And what can we do from here? We want to say, how do you get the current working directory? Is it sys, the sys module? Python, or is it OS? CWD? Maybe it's the OS module. On, or os.path. There's a lot of places this could be. I'm looking for the current working directory function. It's OS. Get current working directory. Okay, let's just check on that. Really? It's not, okay. There it is. So by modifying the code here just to print out some stuff, so I'm gonna like literally import OS and print os.get current working directory. That'll tell us where this storage was executing at the time when it loaded the manifest. And what else should we print out? We should print out self manifest name. All right. And so now we can write that file. And if we run manage shell, hopefully it'll print. No, why did you not print? Maybe we're in the wrong area. No, because it's the mixin. That was the thing we're working on. Maybe, why did, okay. Maybe we need to put the debugger in there. So let's forget this stuff. And we'll say import pdb and pdb settrace. Python 3.6 might have breakpoint available, but I can't remember when it was introduced. So we'll start the shell again. Didn't hit it, so maybe that's an indicator that it doesn't do it until you run this stuff. No? What's going on here? Static files, storage. Oh, good. Even in just tab completing, it got into the breakpoint for some reason. Where are we? So PDB, you can use W to indicate where, which will give you the current stack that you're on and how it's getting here. So we did an exec when it tried to tab complete it, and it's looking at the settings to pick the right storage class and then creating one of those. Okay, now we're starting to get a picture of how these things are put together. And in order to even get the hashed files, it has to do load manifest. And in order to do load manifest, here we are at read. And if we do L, we can list this to see what the scenario is. I hope, yeah, we can import OS here and then do os.get current working directory. So it's at serve conductor, and we can print out, we're at PDB, we don't need to use print. We can just do self manifest name. Okay. So that's interesting. there's nothing. Okay, so is there static files JSON in serve conductor? Is that really how this is working? Let's come over here. I'm not seeing it, right? Thus my eyes deceive me. Alphabetical. There's nothing there. So I would expect that this open won't work. Yet there it is. What the heck? What did that open? So it got dumped into content, and there, I am super confused. How is it opening a path? Because this to me is reading like it's trying to open serve slash srv slash conductor slash static files.json. But here we are, and that file is definitely not in the list. So that's like magical to me. What happened? And here's where the Shiv app is failing. It's not finding anything, and rather than complain, which I wish it would do, maybe we should go back and read that. Maybe there's a setting to make read manifest explode rather than no. Look, Django, I love you guys, but this one is not cool for me. This thing is swallowing the exceptions and just saying I can't find it. And so it's returning, it's kind of a safe behavior in the end because it says there's no content, so just return an empty string, but it just gets down to the bottom and yeah, I'm not super happy that that's, I wish it would have said like, if you can't find the manifest file, blow up, because you're going to need the manifest file if you're using this type of storage. That seems like more like a bug kind of behavior than anything else. Maybe I'll write an issue. Okay, but now we have a very clear idea what's happening. I'm going to just continue. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I typed a bunch of stuff and I was not surprised that it did that. So let's get back to the debugger again. Which turns out to be not as easy as I thought. Where'd it go? The static files, hashed, hashed files. Where to look at the traceback. And list the code. I'm pretty sure the current working directory is the one we care about. Turns a string representing the current working directory. And it's not like, this read manifest method is executing in the context of this shell, so it's not like it has a different working directory. At least I don't think that's the case. Self manifest name is what we said. Okay, let's get into the with block right before the return and look at the manifest file handle. So we'll do, or maybe we shouldn't. Should we step into open? Oh, look at that little gnarly bit. I missed this. It's not Python's open. It's an open method on the storage. Whoa. That is interesting. That's what I missed, because what my operating assumption was, if you were in serve conductor and there's no static files.json there's no way that open would have worked, which is probably true, but it's not open. It's not the built-in open function, the best I can tell. It's something else. It's a method. There's an open in here. How is it doing that? So on the storage file class, maybe? File system storage. This is a nice new feature from GitHub, by the way, where you can kind of hover over something and it can take you there. Pretty cool. So I still haven't found where open is. We can probably just say, where is open? Or help on self open. Does help work here? Help DB? No. That's not the right form of the debugger, at least. Okay. So help self open. Help self. Super. Self about dir self open. It has a call on it. It's just a callable. Okay. What else can we use in there? Stir. Down method storage open. I guess we're going to keep going up this little stack here. File system storage. It has an underscore open. I have a feeling that storage is on line 25, which is up here. Yeah, okay. So storage hands off to the underscore open of the other storage, which in this case is file system storage. So now we're getting somewhere. We've got open here, and it creates a file, and this time it opens on Okay, this has got to be the magic. So here we have self path name. So remember in this traceback, manifest name is just static files.json. Okay. So that's what's coming in as the name parameter. And then we've got path. We got to find path, which I believe, yeah, is in the manifest thing. So there's the static files. We've set static root. It's calling path. Where is path defined? No, that's path level. There's a lot of indirection going on here. And it's a complicated system and it has to serve a lot of needs, I get it. But that's making this a little tricky. Let's come back up to the file system one for a minute. The miss path here. And there's lots of instances of path. There are 52. That was going to take a while to get through them all. Okay, here's path, and it's got safe join. You know what? I'm being really, really silly. We are at where are we? We're at the read manifest. We could step into self-open. Let's step into it. And now we're in open. We're going to step into open. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And it'll just take us there just by navigating. I should have done this a long time ago. So we're going to step into, it's going to step into the innermost thing, I think, which should be self path. Okay. So we've configured a location, so that should work. And then we're going to step into the super path, find out where we are. Yeah, I did trace it logically through the right place. Okay, what is self.location? var conductor. Okay. So it's working on the repo because this remember this is the repo version of this, and it's going to join these properly. If I come back and where are we now? How do I get the value out of this? Well, we'll just call it again. Safe, join, self location. It's going to evaluate this code right now, I think. Yeah, all right. So the repo is doing the right thing. That's where the static files is supposed to be. We need to go through this same process for the Shiv app and find out what it's doing here, because it's not doing the same thing and it's loading nothing. So I can almost guarantee that the problem, whatever the problem is that it's doing something else here and coming up with a different path name when it's trying to load it. So how can we, now this is where it's going to get harder, is it was easy to debug that because all of the stuff is already extracted. But we need to get to well, maybe we can just modify this and do the same thing. Because we know that this is being extracted to this crazy long unique path. And Shiv puts it in a, I found out last week that Shiv, when you start a Shiv app, it actually unbundles itself into this .shiv directory because of complications around dunder file attributes and all sorts of other things. So we can tweak the code that's there and go to the same location of well, we'll probably get right down to the source this time of at that path thing, and here, what is that file? This is the storage. This is the core files storage file, and that's safe and line 316. So we can do that. So let's try that. Let's stop this and go to Django, this big long path, and I want to say sudo vim core storage. Wow, did they move it around? I'm on a different version of Django, so they might have moved it, or I might have misread the thing. Core files storage. I missed a thing. And it was like around 316. So some little bit has changed between the version, but that's okay. And here we want to do import pdb and pdb set trace. And that should do it. Unless it's possible that every time you run it, it extracts it to a new location. I would think that would not be the case, but I don't know. It's possible. So let's start this back up. We're going to go back to the shell. And we're going to copy, like only because I can't seem to remember it, the static files import that we were using. This one. I should just try and remember this. Static files storage. Like that. And storage hashed files. Oh, awesome. Puts us right in the debugger right where we want. So what is self-location? Aha, look at that. I think I see it. Well, maybe not. Var. Wow, I really did that wrong. Safe, join, self, location, and name. What in the world? That's the path. Well, okay, let's keep going. I'm gonna get out of here. Aha. It is a permission error. Okay. And I think, is permission error, is that a subclass of OS error? Oh, come on. So one of the Python built-ins is subclass, permission error, and OS error. Yep. Okay. Now now I at least understand what's going on. So the user in that shiv directory, whoever it is, doesn't have permission to open var www conductor. Permission error is raised, but as that read manifest method has on it, it swallows all OS errors. And permission error is an OS error. So rather than tell us, sorry, you don't actually have permission to open this file, and send us on this gigantic, well, goose chase of thinking it's not knowing the file, it just returns us nothing. Yeah, that's not very cool. So now we're left with a totally different problem from what I thought the original thing was going to be. And that problem is one of permissions. How do we give the user running this the right permissions? Or do we even need to? Because the way this might be something that if we just hooked it all the way through into deployment, might not have been an issue. Wow. I'll explain why. Let's look at it. We have been trying to access, just do a curl command by hacking this up and running the package, running straight from here with a bind parameter. That bind parameter then just gave us something that we could try to curl on. But we're running it as the vagrant user. Here's an interesting thing that we can try. Root should have permission to everything. Your root doesn't matter. So let's try this. Let's see if we can prove if it's a permission thing. Let's change to root. Go back to serve apps and say conductor, and we'll bind to 0.0.0 port 8000. Oh, gotta put the right Django settings in there. Whoops. Okay. Try it again. So we're now the root user executing this executable. So that should give us, I think, all of the power in the world on this virtual machine. So now if we curl that, would you look at that? There it is. So it was definitely that permission issue. Perhaps even more exciting, it worked. This is the template rendering, and here's the thing that it was complaining about. We could probably even, there's the Twitter one right there. So it was doing a lookup of this Twitter, which is the fingerprinted version, the B057. And I was just trying to do that lookup. And the reason that we got that particular failure is because that is the very first static asset listed in the template. That's why it mentioned Twitter above anything else. So because the static files JSON wasn't the right permission, it failed to load that rather than complain, and prevented it from actually loading the manifest. So how do I feel about this at the end now? What are some good and bad aspects of this process that we've seen so far? Debugging, because it's a zip archive, is maybe a little harder, although maybe not. When it came down to it, when I was inserting a debugger in here, which I should go take out, by the way. Yeah, let me remember to do that. Then, oh, come on. It's not on that user. Let's take out the PDB. So we got, we were still able to get into a debugger and put PDB in there. But we had to, in order to do that, we had to figure out, we had to seed the trace back and see this long URL to do it. But it was still possible. I think if you're using a Docker container or some other kind of container format, that's actually a little bit harder, because those kind of sort of changes are not persistent. So you could go into the container, make a modification to drop in a debugger, and the second you leave the container, it's not like that wasn't preserved for you. So that's still a win in favor of a Shiv app for debugging this kind of low-level issue. The other lesson is, it was something that I didn't anticipate. It was something related to permissions, which in the normal deployment process is configured correctly. How do I know this? We can go, one of these is root. So if we go back to var conductor and we look at the permissions, this directory and all of its content is owned by the data user and group. And if we go to Ansible and bring up, well, it's the playbooks, it's the web playbook where we actually do this, and bring up the supervisor config that is, sorry, not that one, this one. Check this out. Which user is running the web server? Data. So if I had taken the time to run this test with this mode, it would have been slower figuring out the templates problem, because we would have had to like iterate through that. But it would have been, but we would never even hit this particular issue with static files, because the permission error would have been a non-issue, since supervisor is already configured to use the right user when executing this. So we've spent basically like an hour and a half debugging a problem. That's not where I thought I'd be. I thought we would be working on putting the static files up on CI, because I really thought that was the true issue, is I wasn't even finding it. But that's not the case. We're not even at that point yet. And the nice part is, because we're still depending on the repository and the repository building the static files, we could actually finish taking Shiv all the way out to production, like incorporate it into the deployment process without touching static files, and get that part deployed and working and logging correctly and all of that. And then move on to static files and do this process again. And the reason I like that idea is because it takes us from building up more and more and more that's changing about the deployment, and it's getting a little piece out in there, and it's converting the system over. And so it's allowing us to get off of uWSGI. It will allow us to get off of creation of some stuff. I'm going to leave a bunch of those things in place in the task execution until the whole process is done. But we can start slowly swapping some pieces in there. So I think that's what we'll do next week. I don't feel like getting into a bunch of code to actually like write up the tasks to go ahead and swap in the deployment. But next week what we'll do is we will figure out how to get the Shiv app as the command for supervisor. Supervisor is the process manager that makes sure that the web server is running so that Nginx has something to talk to. And so we have to figure out a couple of things. We have to actually get the Shiv app. Well, we already getting the Shiv app via the deployment, so that's already done. But we still have to make the thing executable. That's not happening yet. And we have to, I want to do some symlink stuff, because what's happening right now is this thing is, you can see here, is pointing at user bin uWSGI. But in this new world, I want it to do something that looks like, what does it look like? It looks like serve apps conductor.pyz. Now the problem with this right now, though, is conductor.pyz does not exist. I want that to be a symbolic link that will point to the latest package. And what that'll enable the system to do is swap out stuff easily. So if this configuration file wouldn't have to change because it's just pointing at a symbolic link. And if we ever had to do rollbacks, we could quickly switch a symbolic link to a different version of the package, and everything else is just staying looking the same. So this is the idea of the next steps, is to point at this thing and then introduce symbolic link setting to like overwrite, because there's going to be like an overwriting process of you're creating a symbolic link to a file, so that has to work that way. If all of that's done, then there'll be a bit of work to do to set the mode of communication, because right now you can see here the way that we're doing this is Nginx and uWSGI are talking over this socket file. That's not how gUnicorn is going to work. I don't even know if gUnicorn uses a socket file. A socket file is a little bit faster than speaking over HTTP, but again, the site doesn't get enough traffic to like worry about performance at that level. So if we can do this with like a bunch, like just a handful of parameters, like a bind to say the actual localhost and port, and then tell Nginx to talk to just that port, that would be a lot easier configuration than the other stuff that we'd have to do with uWSGI. So that's going to, like, all of these settings are going to go away. The rest of this stuff will basically stay the same, except maybe this one, directory. We have to figure out logging on gUnicorn to make it dump out to the right location. So we have to tell gUnicorn to dump to standard out so that that it will actually write to this log file that supervisor is going to be expecting. So there's definitely pieces to do here before we can get this out to production. I think we've got a good handle on what's going on now, though. So that's good. So today's been a big exploration in debugging and how do you figure out these kind of deep problems. It's not always obvious. Sometimes you get down to the source of the package you depend on, sometimes you have theories that turn out to be wrong. And where I started today was definitely not, I had no notion that it was going to be a permission error in the end. And so there's learning involved away. You just could be humble in the process. Hopefully you found some of this useful today. Sorry I didn't get to more actual like coding, but that is the nature of the beast sometimes. I'm going to take all this information and export it to YouTube like I normally do. So if you want to catch it there, go back and see what some bits of what I did, how we got the debugger going, just the process for this. You're welcome to do that. I have a stream which I will do next Wednesday, schedule permitting. I don't think there's any reason why. That would be July 3rd. And yeah, so if you found this valuable and you've stuck around and want to share on Twitter, please do. Please message me on Twitter. My username is mblayman there as well. I have a website above that you can check out, and a mailing list you can sign up with where I write about Python, I write about Django, I write about all of this kind of technical stuff is what I explore. So that is a useful resource for people. Yeah, I think that about covers it for the night. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.